Good morning.
Morning.
How are you this morning?
Good. Shruti's actually asking me some questions about the presentation right now, so it's
Okay.
a little bit into that.
Okay. Well, I'll get started. Welcome to the meeting. If you're watching on YouTube, we'll have this posted after the meeting, and you can go through it. And we're making a lot of progress on the last few weeks on things. We've been submitting items on our list, and we're going to look over that list in a bit. We're also going to have go over some of the things that we're submitting in the next week or got accepted in the last week. We'll go over those things, and then we'll talk about a bunch of the things that we're working on now, trying to get them to the finish line, which is presentation at a conference or whatever we're up to. So a lot of things going on, but I think everyone will enjoy it. I also wanted to, we'll have some papers at the end too, so stay tuned to the end. So why don't I start with a Slack review, and I'll share my screen. So this is the Slack review. I do this every week now just to make sure we're on top of what's in Slack. We're talking about it. We talk about it on Slack. If you're not in our Slack, please send me a request for an invitation. I can invite you in. We have like 56 members now. I just looked at the general channel, and we have, here it is, 56 people. So I don't know, some people are, no longer with us, but a lot of people, we probably have about 20 people in general who probably view things and respond in some way. So it's a nice little community. So let's go back up to admin is private. There's not much going on there. Aging, we haven't done anything in the aging category in a while. It's been about maybe 4 months, 5 months, maybe 6 months. And, we might pick that back up. I don't know what we're not really doing anything right now that could be considered aging, but it'd be nice to do something. We're also doing stuff with brain organoids. We haven't done much in a couple weeks here, but there's still all this, and I'm still putting together resources on that. Bradenburg vehicles. So, one piece of news for this week is that our paper is now out on the archive. So we have, let's see, Jesse and Daniel like this. This is embodied continual learning across developmental time via developmental Bradenburg vehicles. So this is the archive paper here. This was posted. This has, of course, been submitted to Alife, but we posted the preprint at this point because, it's pretty mature. So I think that's a good time to start, making it public. So this is the archive version. You can see the number here, and this is, like I said, has been submitted to Alife, like about a week ago. So we'll see what they think about that paper. Okay, so let's see. Calls for involvement. Let me go back here. Calls for involvement. I don't think that there's anything there we need to update on. Cognition Future, we've had a little bit of activity in this channel. We have some resources here that Jesse found. And then this tweet by Gary Marcus, which I think Jesse was inspired by on Monday, which basically says that the first person to sort of bring together some aspects of AI with symbolic AI. Okay, so love Jeffrey Hinton's new GLOM paper, which is this paper that we talked a little bit about last week about imagining a deep network with structure, internal structure. Young students who do well to understand what he's trying to achieve. The first person to manage is to meet is Desiredata, and algebraic mind, next decade in AI will revolutionize the field. And I think this is a link to the Glom paper, basically saying that if you're able to take like deep learning networks, figure out how to make them a little bit more sort of brain-like, and we might talk about this in a little bit with respect to the ANNs and BNNs paper, and combine that with this sort of symbolic approach, which he introduces in Algebraic Mind, which is one of his books, and this next decade in AI, which Jesse's talked about in the meetings, and that will be revolutionizing the field. And so I think that's a nice challenge. I think that's definitely in the direction that we're going. So thank you, Jesse, for bringing that up. Anything else in these? I don't think anything new. Let's see okay, so now in the Ethics Society Tech channel, Jesse just posted the latest slides. So we'll go over those in a little bit, Jesse. Epistemological directories. We have some posts. Some talk announcements. And then this thing about Johan John's Sherpa stuff is sort of a way to talk about someone who builds or helps others traverse epistemological directories. So I think that would be a good inclusion in our epistemological directories manuscript, maybe. So I imagine Steel Manning or Sherpa stuff refers to like finding the best way forward in some resource. But you can talk more about that later, Jesse.
Yeah, I would say we'll talk more about that later. But yeah, we'll if we're gonna come back to later, I'll just say it later.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Events discussion. Discussion of future science conferences. This is from the Neuromatch group. So it looks like that might be an interesting thing to look at. And what else? This is something Daniela brought up. There's a new journal, and I think we talked about this journal before. It's Collective Intelligence, and she was kind of like asking if we could submit something there. And I'm very open to it. I'm just trying. The question is what could we submit to this journal? So I make that as sort of a challenge to the group. If we can think of something that we can submit that we've been talking about to Collective Intelligence, and I think you can like go Google Collective Intelligence ACM and look at the criterion, and maybe we can get a couple of candidates ready, and then maybe we can pursue this. It's a longer term goal because you have to create a journal article, but I think it's doable, and it's definitely something that we would benefit from. So I think that's a good thing to think about. See, is there anything in Frontier Map?
Hi, Krishna.
Hi, Krishna. How are you? Okay, we're just going through the Slack here. I'm not sure what this is. Oh, this is so I think we need a new term for aesthetic criticism. The word critic triggers people.
Where the Sherpa comes from.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. My non-Eurocentric suggestion is Sherpa. Okay, someone who guides you through unfamiliar terrain. So yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. So let's see. Metabrain models. Nothing there. Nothing in virtual reality well, there is this interesting thing, Microsoft Mesh. I'm not sure what this is, but it looks like a nice AR application, augmented reality. So, yeah, so check these channels out when you get the chance, and I think that's all for the Slack. I just like to keep up with the activity in there because, as you can see, it's somewhat fruitful. Sometimes it brings us back to things that we talked about in text form. Hello, Krishna. And so I think, why don't we let Jesse do his thing here, and then we'll go back to the submissions and review those.
Sure. Is there any particular thing you'd like me to focus on?
No, just an update.
Okay. So for a general update, I've personally been working a lot on Alife-related stuff this week. There's been some progress on that, which is good. But also, I've had people reach out to me a lot about the New York City women's computing thing, and I'm trying to pull up something with that right now, which is our ethics focus for the moment. Oh, yeah. So just to do a very quick overview of this again. Also has some other updates about like invasion and other related things. So
Okay.
I'll kind of try to go through that in order. Okay. So I just set up sure to have access to this. This is a little bit. There's a lot more that will be on this actually, but this is kind of a basic framework that we have. So this is, those don't recall. This is kind of our, from our main GitHub group, the ethics team here, and just this is the kind of the front page of the repo. This is where we're at right now. We'll focus on project number 1, which is the presentation. We're going through the different parts of it. I think it actually may be about 20 minutes now, which is just fine because there's so much stuff to cover. This will probably be updated later today because there's been a lot of movement on this front. We have people that are selecting some of the topics and kind of coming off the board. There's certainly nothing that is restricting people from working on anything, but just to kind of actually give a sense of what's going on. There's been some updates for this here, and I'll show that in the next fancy image theme, fancy ethics theme. But yeah, just as another reminder, it's gonna work actually. Yeah, it doesn't work. It's an ethics. The Near Celebration of Women Computing is a very open conference, and it's somewhat diversity focused, but it has a wonderful actual community of professional development and support, and getting people information they need to do with it to have success in the future. And I really like it. And we presented there the last 3 years or so, 2 years, and we were going to do last year, but it didn't quite work out. And it was canceled. So we're kind of following up on our tradition of doing work there. And like you can see, some of this other work that we've been doing here in ResearchGate. And where we're at now with all of this is basically this project board. We have a presentation that's upcoming, and we're looking to kind of finish it up in the next couple of weeks. We have some topics that are in progress and to do. We have AI bias neutrality, philosophy, safety and ethics. Min has kind of spearheaded the comparative analysis work. I think Shruti might be working on this too, because she's mentioned a bunch of specific people that have been affected by, the controversies. She mentioned too much brew from Google, and we just as this meeting was starting, we had a discussion with Slack about that. So I'm actually going to put that in progress. I'm not logged into GitHub here. Wow. Well, okay. I just restarted my computer for the meeting, and apparently it logged me out of a bunch of stuff. So
Oh,
anyway, open source project manager still works for the reason, I guess.
yeah.
So this is underway. Algorithmic auditing is one of the more technical topics that will be definitely being used, and uh, I would say, you know, if Krishna, if you want to kind of transform algorithmic auditing into the feedback concept, it's fairly similar. You can apply feedback and have reviewers at different points in it, at a number of different, you know, points for this. But it might fit with that. It might fit with uh, maybe not with this, but fairness and interpretability. It could fit with even just obviously this one, but even this to an extent. And we have a well, let me use my Zotero here. Just to mention this again, yeah, we have a big growing library of stuff here. There's a bunch here that are. This is just a general dump for it, but also like here's some specific stuff about feedback. I really liked Sarah Brown's work on this. I mentioned her in previous meetings. There's Kansu Kanka here. She has her own ethics lab, the AI ethics lab itself. So we could use these are all kind of finding different ways to incorporate feedback into the process in some ways. And then also like this is kind of a major paper with Mitchell and Jabru from Google and others, that would be, you know, quite relevant to these things. So there's quite a lot of stuff here. So these are good resources here that we're building. We have a bunch of things going. We have some specific news articles about Google as well. Actually, I'm gonna send this library to Shruti next. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff here. And quickly go through the slides, which are, you know, not finished and not being updated now, but the framework is there more so. This is kind of here. These numbers are just for our reference right now, but just it's going to be a very rapid fire situation. So kind of our intro. I want to do a little bit of the philosophical background, but that's going to be, you know, very quick because we got to get to the areas of focus that we want to actually address.
Are you meaning to share your screen or?
Yes.
Oh, it's not up. I can't see it.
Okay. What happened? Were you seeing anything that I was saying?
Now I can see it. Yeah, you weren't sharing it for a bit. Yeah.
When did it shut off?
Oh, probably when your password was when you logged out or got logged out.
Oh, that's so disappointing.
Okay.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, I was expecting to show everything. Were you seeing the Zotero library at all?
Oh, yeah, we didn't see this, but
You just
see
seeing
this
this often. Oh, great. That's disappointing. So very quickly, here's the project board that I was mentioning. This is all in our resource list is most accessible here. You can still see my screen, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Fair enough now. The Zotero library is here. The project board is here, just to show that again. These are different topics at different levels of involvement. Oh, I think that's what it was. I think I understand what took me out of it now. And just to show the library, again, all the good things I said are still true. There's a lot of resources here that have been growing. Here's the feedback papers I was talking about. Sarah Brown, Kansu, Jabru, Mitchell. These are like, these papers are worth looking at. And also, I made a collection of links about Google itself that are, some of these are like, popular news articles and stuff. What's going on at Google? This is like from Engadget and Reuters and stuff like that, about their research stuff. We'll definitely be asked about Google, so let's get mentioned there. All right. And then I was saying, this is a very rough framework for the presentation. Shruti's on it now. These numbers are kind of just for us, for our reference right now, but we won't have that much time, even if we have. I think we will have up to 20 minutes now, and I think it's going to be a full presentation. But there's just a lot of ground to cover here. So we'll have this intro part and setting the stage, and then the conclusion, and we're working more on the unifying themes and tying together as we flesh out these other parts. But the meat of it will be these different areas of focus. And I've updated, like we've just updated the Google ethics team, and Shruti might add more here because he mentioned a bunch of other controversies that have come into place. So each of these slides, we could have maybe 1 or 2 slides per topic, depending on how much people want to do, like to show. But it's going to kind of be an element. This section will be a practice in being concise and kind of maybe set the stage with a sentence or two, and then I kind of want to reference like Cording's how to make concise papers with the context. And there were 3 C's, and I forgot some of them in this moment. But setting the context rings for content and making some conclusions about them. I don't know if those are the actual 3 C's or not, but basically, having some really precise points that you make after you establish the broader context. And we'll be going through each of these areas of focus with different and kind of presenting. Okay, well, here's what people need to be thinking about in a holistic sense. I added. I want to talk about. This could be someone else's talk, but this is something I definitely want to include here because I think it's really, really, really important. And also, I virtually met Abeba at NeuroIPS a little bit last year, a few months ago.
Right.
And I went back to her Twitter main page, and I saw this thread, which is really good. It talks about algorithmic injustice and relational ethics, and she goes through a paper in this tweet thread, and it's very good. She kind of like literally goes through all these highlights and explains different things, and I think I particularly liked the tweet. Yeah, this is one that I like this one, and she I won't go into this very much here, but she has a really interesting way of critiquing the idea of we want to have neutral data, and neutral data. We're going to have a very sterilized worldview about data and stuff. And she brings up in a way that the view from nowhere, a neutral view, and what is this, and what is this. What are the assumptions that go into this sort of thing, and she gets into the criticism of it, and she talks about Bayes and how the mechanism of Bayes itself affects things, and she really gets into it, and I think this even at the algorithmic level, at some of the where the theory meets the practice. these are really interesting things to be thinking about or talking about. So again, I really want to. I'm just gonna have this for myself. This won't be the actual slide. Like these are gonna be more and more fleshed out. So this, I think, after Alife submissions, this will kind of become my main focus again. But for me in specific, it's been Alife this week, and some other topics as well. Like Princeton, I've had to sort out some of them. But as far as women in computing goes, we're moving, and we're honestly a lot of things. I think by next week, which will be the 20th, a week from now, I think we're going to be in very good shape because this is one of those situations where we could do so much, but I think this will be a great start. And also just to keep in mind, just to mention this, look at here. This is still ongoing, I believe. So we still have this call for contributors to this topic, and boy, I was kind of everything on my Chrome. That's interesting. This is still ongoing, and this will be a lot of our work that comes from developing these very small nuggets. We'll be going into some essays for this topic. These are 1,000, 1,500 word essays, and then these will sort of be these essays will fit into. I think by next week I'll put out a template for these essays and also show the broader manuscript. I think that will help some people because there is a manuscript being put together where this will all sort of come together into something really nice, I think. So can I do this? Great, and my screen is still sharing, so that's good. I put my own hand up.
Okay.
All right. So that's the update for that. There are some other topics that we could talk about from Alife. I imagine you're going to go over those submissions, and you're going to talk about the ANN BNN paper. Krishna's here. Yeah. Maybe I can.
Jesse?
Talk to discuss.
I'm
sorry?
Yeah. Oh, you cut out a little bit there. But, so, I'd like to see what you've been up to with respect to Alife.
Yeah, I don't have a big fancy manuscript to show right now because it's all in pieces.
Yeah.
But I have been working on where is the thing that I do have here. I have all these things about.
So can I show something?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay. Actually, earlier I was having my dinner, so I was not able to say anything. Okay, so here I go. Okay, is my screen visible?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Okay, there we go.
So this was earlier the positive feedback paper, but as I was researching more, I come to realize that we can split that paper into two parts, and since not much of work is done in positive feedback, so we can make it a good big paper and get more collaborations Like I was seeing, there has been a group in San Francisco University. They are also, working on the same thing. So what we can do for a positive feedback paper, we can get, even more collaboration and make it into a state-of-the-art paper. And for this, I have, I've written it from scratch. It's by some artificial intelligence, and it's till now it's like 4 pages. It's about type of bias on the sample bias, inclusion bias, major bias. So I have to add the solution and I have to add the references. So I guess this paper would be completed by, I guess, the end of this week, I guess, because it's today's Saturday, and by Monday I'll be done with that, and so we can send it to some conference or some general. So you and Jesse both have access to it, so you can check it out and give your valuable suggestions.
Yeah, I think I saw this, so I think I have the. Why don't you put it in the Slack? Yeah, so you can just open up the permissions. I guess you can send it to us direct message or put it in one of the channels. But yeah, I think I saw this. Yeah, it looks very good. I'm glad that you're making progress on this. I have looked it over. I've been working on some things this week, but I can give some feedback, and Jesse can give some feedback on it. So it looks great.
Yeah, actually, since I was working on this, so I have rough manuscripts ready for the positive feedback paper also. So with a little bit more collaboration, we can get it into a really nice paper. So we have almost all those 2 papers ready. This one would be ready by, I guess, Monday, and the next one will take time, I guess, a couple of weeks. But that, according to me, we can convert it into a very nice paper, because it's topic not everyone is talking about. There is quite a few going on ethics, and that positive feedback is a very subset of that, and I guess we can focus a good journal for that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, so well, I'll talk about some of the potential venues later. And be on the lookout for venues. There's always stuff that's coming up, and like if you find something, you can put it in the Slack, and I can add it to the. And I'll show you what the spreadsheet looks like in a little bit. But yeah, definitely.
I sent you one journal. It was from this the Alife press is from MIT. And
yeah.
There was one more thing, one more journal from MIT, and I sent you the link. I guess in Slack I sent it, so we can also target that. It's not for this paper, but I guess for the if we don't get selected into Alife, so we can target that journal also. So I'll be keeping an eye on all the journals and see.
All right, yeah, I'll check into that. All right, yeah. So thanks. Jesse, you were going to do something with the Alife present.
I'll just show also very quickly this here. I think I figured out my theme and my concept, and then I'll be fleshing out the writing actually today, because it's there. It's not in this document. That's it. But I think this is going to be it. I think I pretty much mentioned this to you. But like I'm going to go through. I'm going to do a little bit of things that are inspired a little bit by the symbiotic cognitive computing angle. But I'm going to do. I think it's something that could actually be a full paper, honestly. But I don't know if I'm going to. We'll see if I want to get into it that much. But at the very it's going to be either an exercise trying to make it very concise, because there's a lot of material for this for me anyway, for 2 pages.
Yeah.
But it's like, do you want to get over the hump or not? And I don't know. And I wanted to have a little bit more fleshed out with this by today, and it's been a very busy week, so you know. But I think this is what I'm going to do. And I like the title is really cool to me because can you see my screen right?
Yes. Yes.
The title is really cool to me because it captures this merging, and I think it fits well with the cyborg stuff and virtual reality stuff, and Bradly had been covered as well. Allusions to conversations and conversations that were sort of tangential, about where's sort of applications for all of them looking at. Okay, like VR and this sort of human-computer interaction, which is some of a lot of people we get into, like the chai computer-human interaction. And body intelligence. Like we're hitting a lot of those areas along the interfacing points, and that's something that I'm very particularly interested in. I think there's going to be a lot going on there in terms of both like economic drivers and applications for research that we're doing. So a lot of the times the stuff that we talk about is very nebulous or seems nebulous and seems very theoretical, but like there's Alife is kind of an interesting mix of things, and I can't seem to move. There we go. Alife is kind of an interesting mix of things in that sense, and maybe a good platform to bridge into those areas. And I wanted to show this will work, I think. This is kind of funny, as a total aside.
Oh.
There's a new book out by Joshua Hinton and Jeffrey Bangio, which is a scam book. So
Yeah.
here we find on Amazon. Some things, yes, I my acceptance at the Envision has been confirmed. Go me. Man, I can't seem to find what I'm looking for here. There's some really good stuff that has come in terms of looking at Alife related things. And it may not be here. They're not here. But maybe it's in Slack. So, but I wanted to show something about I want to show more specific. I wanted to show the hold on a moment. I have a way to do this. I wanted to show the guideline paper for Alife. The one that shows all the rules that went down in 2020.
Oh yes.
I was looking to find that, and for whatever reason, it's not anywhere else I'm looking, but I know it is.
It's Open Problems in Artificial Life paper.
Yeah.
This was from 2000.
So we're going to do it like this, because it's going to be that way. So here it is. I think you can see this, right?
Yeah.
I'm such a nerd, I put it on Facebook. Okay. But this is a list of open problems from 2000, and I put together an Alife, which is very interesting, and gives a nice overview of stuff. And I found this thanks to digging around about Alife, but also it was mentioned on the map that the Alife knowledge map in our somewhere at the epistemological directories in the collection of stuff, thanks to Bradly putting this together a while ago. I found this on paper, and just to get a quick overview for people who don't really know, because I didn't really know, and we're doing all this stuff at this conference, but breaking it down into these categories is pretty good. How does life arise from non-living? What are the potentials and limits of living systems? And how is life related to mind, machine, and culture? And I feel like A lot of the things I want to address in my short paper fit here. A lot of, a lot of stuff from artificial or biological neural networks, you can see where it fits in with, many of the things here. And even what we're doing with continued learning and embodiment and those things, it's kind of we're a lot of things hit in these categories, and I think being able to kind of, it's always good to, when you're going to a conference, and obviously Bradley is much more versed in this than I am, especially at Alife. But for people who don't know, it's good to have a little bit of, founding principles kind of background that you can speak to and write to and communicate to when you're at, these things. And I feel like this is a pretty, this is something that's probably good to be aware of as we're finishing or tailoring or writing or whatever, thinking about how to present to this audience. So, but I mean, even you can see ethical principles for artificial life and the ethics question is still there, which is, a very good thing to have there. But, I wanted to mention that very quickly, and that's good. And I also mentioned after this, that I showed you where I'm at with my paper, and I have this vision for it, and even kind of going back to thesis, Janet Clogen's like fake mouse, and how, like, if you don't, I don't have a good picture for that, but like, it was quote unquote a mouse that could turn anywhere, but it was also this sort of avatar on it was this avatar that was on one show now. It's an avatar that was sort of on a this is blue. It was an avatar that was sort of on top of a board. Like, it wasn't really the mouse, right? It was this computer that was, that had these different components that it could move along. That was robotic hardware that was totally separate, and the mouse was just being pulled along by a magnet, right?
Yep.
And so I feel like that's such a great way to really, to kind of think about where we're going as like this distance over time, is becoming different. And even in the sense of one of the concepts I'm going to be exploring in the paper is, which this is sort of this, this avatar, and now as things are becoming different, we're sort of able to put our own avatar into other. It's sort of being inverted, but not quite. And I'm going to be exploring that a little bit in the messages that I'm writing, and talking about some of the developments since this, and going from there into, well, what are the mechanisms at play? What are the hardware dependencies that artificial life needs now, and what is the remix that we're going towards, and what are the new arenas that where we're putting our avatars into? And this dovetails a lot into virtual augmented reality, and so on. So that's the conceptual preview of what I want to do with this paper very quickly. So I'll mention a little bit of that. And I think very quickly I will talk about energy before we talk about the rest of the papers. If that's okay.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So I think these forms are still up. Regular admissions are still open. They will be open. I'm encouraging a lot of people to go. If you haven't applied, you should apply now. And I said that to everybody in the lab. I don't care. You should apply. And I say that a lot. If you have any questions, if you've never applied to a conference, if you're unsure, if it sounds weird, if you don't know, say, oh, is my work applied? The short answer is you're fine. the long answer is talk to me, and I'd be happy to walk through it. I've done this many times over almost half a decade. So I'm very comfortable with it, and I really encourage people to go. It's virtual. There's no cost associated with it. What's really amazing is that they want to send you swag, like gear, and they're going to try to do it, I believe, even if you're not inside the United States. You could get Princeton Envision t-shirt. I know that doesn't really affect things that much, but I should have worn my Princeton Envision t-shirt today. They're some of my most favorite conference swags of all time. So this is ongoing. Please do this. I'm currently trying to get I have a very good friend of mine who I won't mention because, but I totally could because it's warranted. And they have been on the fence for 3 years applying, and they confessed to me why they didn't apply. And their reason was essentially thinking they didn't have enough expertise or something like that, which is totally silly because Vision is like the perfect place to go and get acquainted with a wonderful atmosphere of people. So don't be put off by it or feel like you don't fit in. Like Envision is like the place to be for that purpose specifically. I believe they also have their I believe their website's finally updated too. So that's cool. You can see this here. I'm covering the blind spots, which is good. It is founded by students and it's focused by students. It's a great thing. I think apply now. Yeah, okay, just form. There is the research symposium application. Did you submit yours, Brad?
Yes, I submitted one actually for the lab, and I don't have it up today, but it's basically the same thing that we submitted to the Cyber Cafe. So it's a similar thing. I made some changes, and I filled out the form, and we might add in some stuff on VR as well. But I wanted to. Well, we can talk about it when we have to put it together. But I did submit it.
I wanted to ask, and I didn't. I don't think you were put on the spot too much, but I didn't put you on the spot on that. But mostly because the form is still open, and I have a funny story because I had one of those things last night where it's like, I'm winding down. I'm mentally I'm going to be ready for the meeting tomorrow, and and it's just that this little voice in your head that comes up and says, "Hey, is anything due right now?" And so I looked, and the email basically says they were due last night at midnight. So I hurriedly filled out my application form. Not too hurriedly, of course, because it was very good, if I may say so. But I filled it out, and I did it last night before sleep, which is always awkward. But it happens to the best of us and the worst of us, and I'm somewhere in that category. So I did it myself. However, as expected, and it's one of those things too, where the deadline is passed, and the form's still open, and you're like, well, I probably could wait until the morning. But it's like you just do it anyway and get it done because you already. I thought this was actually due essentially next week or next weekend, but I looked at the thing and it said it was due the 12th. So all right.
Yeah.
Needless to say, the point of all of this is I'm pretty sure that was only for first rounders because I don't think bear in mind, this. Let me come back here. Oh, good, you applied, Krishna. That's great. That's good. I approve of that. Bear in mind, Envision is it recently changed like their founder has graduated, and so this is the first time they're doing it. The last year was the first time they were doing it over a completely new, a completely different situation. And then the pandemic happened, and now they're making it virtual. So it's a little bit here and there, but obviously I'm sort of protective and supportive of it. But there's, what the takeaway from this is, like, you still have plenty of time to apply, and if you want to you don't have to present your research. It's totally optional. This is the first time I've ever had. This is the first time I've ever had a straight, hey, research is, present your research. Like, they've had similar things in the past, but never just like, hey, if you want to present your research, submit it, and we'll try to give you space to do it. And I think they've seen a lot of positive results from that, from like the way NeuroMex has been, the way many other conferences have been very open and welcoming in that sense. So that's great. But the point is, like, if you haven't applied yet, please apply. I will be happy to help. If you want to present your research, I'm quite sure you still have an opportunity to do so. Even though the first deadline, which I think was mostly for the first round, even though it's still a rolling deadline, we do have something that Bradly presented. It's something, a fairly large overview for the lab, and I'm sure anybody who wants to contribute to that, you can do that in some form, or find a way to like bounce your own off of it. I'm not sure if they're going to have limits on like 1 or 2 presenters kind of a thing, but I think there's a lot of opportunity to take either your own work specifically or something lab adjacent and present it here. And it'll be a great opportunity to do that. I did submit something for Cognition Futures. It's kind of a similar overview of what I'm doing with the project, kind of the frontier map approach to it, and where things going. It's quite similar to, I just told about the cyborg cognitive futures from Alife that I'm submitting. It's similar. Everything kind of washes together a little bit when we're talking about it at the same time. It's cognitive futures related, and it will be talking a little bit about some lab stuff, but mostly kind of describing the project and where it's going. The project itself, the application kind of, it specifically identifies, hey, is this project like an early stage thing you're doing, and look for your, are you early stage, or do you have late stage, and certain things you want to, certain results you want to present. And I think that's a really good, differentiation to make. And from what I heard, the last I heard, I asked Mayu, the co-president, there'll be 5 to 7 minute presentations, so very quick. But I believe it'll be sort of like semi-flash talk and then discussion room afterwards. So kind of have your quick thing, and then a discussion to follow. So that's my Envision update. I'm very glad Krishna applied. I think some other people in the lab applied. Anson's on the fence. I want everybody to go, so I'm obviously going to mention him. My other friend that I previously mentioned, I think will do it. Logan will be there, our friend in spirit. Logan Thrash Collins will be there. He's going to talk about his work on genetics and conjugate stuff, and that'll be really great. One of my biggest regrets ever was not working with Logan on a project last Envision. We had the opportunity to do it, and then, okay, would you want to collaborate on this presentation? We're talking about the model, the importance of modeling, like emulating like brain bees, basically. That was sort of his jam for a while. Why, brain bees are sort of that nice step up from flies, and why. But it didn't happen. Probably my biggest Envision regret was it was like so close. We were talking about it at the table, and it was like, oh no. So, Envision is always a place to do more, because there's no drawback to doing more there, and it's a really nice environment. And if we do stuff and you don't want a presenter to talk about it, nobody really cares. Like, no one's going to judge you harshly against it. But if you want to make something from your whatever you do there, it's just like it's a very good environment. So enough about our vision. Unless anybody has any other questions or comments.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that, yeah, I had, like, my plan is to take the presentation that we had for, actually, the last Envision, I sent you a presentation, or I made one, like, in November 2019. So this thing is really out of date by now. And, of course, it's going to have to be updated. And, but so that's basically the idea. It's like an overview of the lab activities. I was looking over, Krishna says, nice coffee mug, Jesse.
It's funny, I actually, they're both right here. I have two of them, and they're both shipped in the same, they're both shipped in almost the same way. And they're both, one of them isn't mine, one of them is my housemate's, and they're wonderful, the same model, and they're both shipped frequently in the same way from totally different. So, yes, there's a story behind the mug and still on the way. Nice.
This is my mug. I
Nice.
Looks sturdy. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt. The presentation from 2 years ago?
Yeah, well, it wasn't even 2 years ago. It was like a year and 4 months. But yeah, it's just woefully out of date, though, anyways. So it's just amazing to see it and then think how much progress has been made.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I kind of wonder what. Do you have the original version anymore? Like,
Yeah, I have it. I put it in the. I sent him a link to it, which is kind of. But I can send it to you. I can put it up in Slack, just as an aside, like a historical aside. So, anyways, yeah, thank you. I want you to do one thing. Can you share your screen again? I want to show something in the Slack, one of the Slack channels.
Sure.
I forgot to do this during the Slack review. So, SIGCHI is, yeah, I think
Which
it's
one?
the events news, maybe. Okay, and then if you scroll up a bit, it might be up a bit.
This is a cool event, by the way. Neuro and India.
Oh yeah.
I tagged a bunch of people there, and Cindy actually was appreciative of that. So that's cool. Was this one you looking at?
Oh no, up the next one up. There it is.
Oh,
so if you want to register for SIGCHI, or well, we have this paper at this workshop, Emergent Interaction, and to do that you have to register for the SIGCHI conference and then register for the workshop underneath. And so if you want to register, the early bird registration ends on March 16th. So you have a little bit of time to get in and register. If you want to register, yeah, so the rates, and so what you can do, if you don't, if you want to attend the whole conference, fine, but you can actually register for individual days of the conference. And so if you want to just register for one day, and so yeah, they have it broken down by different countries. So category C, category H, and then the early bird fee is cheaper than like later registrations. And then none of you are ACM members, I imagine, so that's going to be more. But then so you'd register for a day of the conference, and then you would register for the workshop, which is I think $30. So if you want to do this soon, because the prices go up after the 16th. If you all you have to do for this page, this is the page, just click on like register now, and it'll walk you through the registration. And then when you get to the page where it says your fee, it'll be like it'll offer you one day or for the whole conference, and you can do one day or you can do the whole conference. And then the next page is like which workshop do you want to attend. And so then you scroll down, there's a very long list of workshops, and it's Emergent Interaction. And then there's a code that you'll have to enter. And if you go back to this, oh, well, you can do that. You can go back to the Slack for a minute. Yeah, that's the personal information for that. I don't know if I put the code on here. Yeah, access W46. So that's for that workshop, and I got it in the email. So I think if we're registering for that workshop and you're part of the paper, you can use that code, and you'll see it on the page. So all of that will be, you can do all of that, and I'm registered, so we don't need to. You don't have to come if you can't afford to or can't do it at that time. But that's. I just wanted to make that an option. So we also have some deadlines associated with this. So we have to get the camera-ready version of the paper ready by April 11th. So that's in about a month. And
that's exactly the day after both Envision and UX Celebration Online Computing for reference.
Well, yeah, I think we can get it done. It's not that much work. It's just a little bit of editing.
This is the one that's already. Did they give us back any more reviews about this? I forget.
No, we got an email with reviews in it, but I don't think it was that. I don't think it was that much there.
I think it was less extensive than the first time, right?
Right.
First, yeah.
And so, that's when we have to have the revisions in, and then the 18th is the deadline for the talk. So we need a 15-minute talk as well. And so that's something that we'll just come up with, I think, in the next month, put together a short talk on it, and then record it, which is, we know how to do that here. And then the workshop will be later, like in May. So we'll, when that happens, we'll have more instructions. But that looks good. I think we can do all that in about a month. And I just wanted to point that out to let people know that that's going to happen soon, the early bird deadline. So other than that, then you saw in that channel that there were a couple other things that I missed on different things that are coming up. So yeah, look over that channel in the Slack if you want to. There we go. So this is the conference.
I don't know. There's a deadline later this month for this one, but this looks kind of interesting. Comes in robot-human interactive communication, and I tried to bold it, but personalities for robot and virtual characters, philosophy issues, this is kind of I kind of want to tag Anson in this, but also the machine learning. So there's something that people have that's kind of along this line, cognitive development. There's a lot of opportunities here. It's not something I don't know who targeted this for. I never knew about it, honestly. But if there's something that sparks your attention,
yeah.
Let's see. This is an interesting conference happening too in Europe and India. It's worth checking out. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out where I heard this. I think I heard this through on Twitter via some of your IPS related discussion groups there. Also, Bias India is the account, so it'd be cool to follow them. Should added. This poster competition, you might check that out, get them there, or D1 related stuff. If we have a good poster for ANs, BNNs, maybe that too, or that'd be another project to do.
Right.
And then we'll talk about the demo. I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, thank you for pulling it back up. So yeah, there are a lot of opportunities and they're coming all the time. So I'm going to actually go over our spreadsheet here on the submissions. And hopefully this will, I think I included a lot of these on there. I know I included the Roman. So this is allostasis machines. We have to follow up on this. We have the evolution submissions, which are again open until April 30th. or April 15th. I can't remember, but that's something if you you feel like it's ready, it only needs to be like 500 words. You can submit it through their portal, evolutionmeetings.org. This is the upcoming one, Artificial Life. So we have a couple submissions for this. We have, of course, the so-called Baby Minds paper, which we've submitted and have a preprint of now. Jesse was showing us the one he's going to submit. And then the ANNs, BNNs paper, which I will pull up in a minute to show what it looks like now. And that will be submitted probably tomorrow or later today, because the deadline, of course, is tomorrow. So it's coming up very fast. This is the extended deadline, so they're not likely to extend it. So good luck on this. This is our target for the weekend here, and then afterwards there's some other deadlines coming up. This is the epistemological directories talk submitted to CSVConf. And then I have the manuscript version of this underneath. And so I think we talked about this in the Slack a little bit, putting things in this manuscript. I don't have a link to the manuscript here, and I'll probably put it in after the meeting, but I'm just trying to assemble like a bunch of things from the two. So we've submitted 2 abstracts on the topic to CSVConf last year and this year. And then we have some other things that we can flesh it out with. So I think the Sherpa idea is great. That's something we could put in. There are other things that we need to have in there, like what's the motivation for epistemological directories. It's a self-directed learning aspect. And we have other things that we might want to do as well, like we have a upcoming INCF talk, and it's through DevaWorm, but I mentioned the epistemological directories in that talk, so we might want to have, we want to keep working on this idea, and we want to keep getting it out there into the world. So this growth form and theory of deep learning paper. So this is something we're working on through DevaWorm, but I actually got Daniela expressed interest in contributing to this. So this is something that is in like a abstract form right now, but I think it would be suitable for Roman if we could make the deadline for this. But it's basically this idea of like, there are deep learning networks, and then what can that do to explain development, or vice versa. And so, we might try to push on that, or we might try to submit it somewhere else. But it's definitely, if you're interested, let me know. We can talk about it a little bit more. Then there's this, let's see, next one. Oh, the Envision conference. So, yeah, so Cognition Futures, and then, I think the oral overview, that's going to be for that. And I submitted that already, and Jesse submitted his already, so now we wait for the conference on that. We have to prepare our talks, of course, but that'll come. What else? This MetaBrains models overview, that's something that is in our developmental AI roadmap, but that's one thing that we don't have right now. I'll show you that after I do this sheet, but that's the one thing we don't have in place on that roadmap. And we need a venue for it. Maybe that's something we can prepare for a journal. We actually do have, I actually did submit an abstract to the AI AGM or ABM conference on this. Yeah. So yeah, that is there, but that's not a paper. So, I wanted to kind of create a manuscript on this as well. So there's Neuromatch Academy coming up. The Google Summer of Code is on its, ongoing. Gibsonian information paper is still being reviewed. We'll probably hear back about this in April. Society and Ethics working on that. AI Lexicon working on that. Let's see. Okay, down towards the bottom is a little bit better here. So this is the EI workshop here. We have 2 things. We have something on Cognition Futures and something on developmental embodied neurosimulation. We talked about this last week. So this is coming up soon, I think. So this is something we need to, like the 3-minute talk on. So I know Jesse is probably, going to do something on this Cognition Futures 3-minute talk. But, and be aware that it's harder than it seems to make this into a 3-minute summary. Like, you may think it's just a couple slides, but you have to get all your information in there. And I suggest, it needs to be visual. It needs to be sort of like I suggested, doing like a roadmap or an overview and then a specific thing that you want to focus on. So there's this proposal session for SIPS 2021 that's coming up in April. That's this Society for the Improvement of Psych Science. And then there's this other thing, what can AI do for ABM? That's this conference that is the Inverse Generative Social Science Workshop. That's, I think, been moved to June, but I'm not sure. And this is where the MetaBrains model stuff would go. Then I mentioned to Jesse this week, maybe, and this is due May 4th, that he might be interested in proposing an interest group on Cognition Futures to CogSci conference. Well, it's I don't know I don't think you need to have very much there. I mean, it's just like a short, and I don't know, maybe you need to have a bunch of people involved, in which case it really wouldn't be a very good fit. But, you can check that out. And then this Roman conference. So let me put this here: Cognition Futures, or what did I say? Oh, the developmental DL, I'll just call this developmental DL, and that'll be like a mental trigger. But yeah, we might want to do this. I'll think about it, but I can't think too long because it's coming up. So those are our, again, if you have things to add to this list, please, send them to me in Slack or put them on the list if you have access. So that's that list, and I was going to, what was I going to do after I was going to show this roadmap. So this is the updated Developmental AI roadmap. I've labeled this with different papers that we have in place now. So we have a lot of things with a lot of papers and abstracts. So this continuum embodied learning, this is the Baby Minds paper. We have this on archive. We have this Gibsonian information paper submitted to CogSci, and if it gets accepted there or not, we'll still preprint it and make it available. This Developmental Brainberg Vehicles paper, which seems like a long time ago, but it was only less than a year ago. That's on archive. This ANN BNN paper, which I'll show in a minute, has been submitted to Alife 2021. The Allostasis Machines paper is accepted to SIGCHI 2021 Emergent Interaction Workshop. The MetaBrains Models is AI ABM Conference. And Training on Viewpoint Networks is not actually a paper on this, but it's covered in this open review paper. This is with Ojwal and Jesse. So you can see we have a lot of pieces in place for this. And a lot of different, I think this has come together nicely, but I think, and then this is the presentation for the, Embodied Intelligence Workshop. The next step now, of course, is to sort of think about all these pieces together and how we can put them together.
Bradley?
Yeah.
I think that we can, target the positive feedback paper for neural IPS.
Oh, yeah. I think I have the NeurIPS on the other, on the DevaWorm one. Well, why don't I put that on this list? Thank you for reminding me.
And for this current paper that we are working, that bias in AI, can we submit it in the IEEE conference that was shared on Slack?
Okay.
I'm actually asking that, would it be a good fit?
Well, we can look into it a little bit more. I think, the best way to do that, I guess, is to submit it. Do they have like a track where they talk about ethics, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, they have something regarding, I guess, bias and ethics. So, and I guess the submission is on 21st March, and it would be completed by 21st March, so we can submit it on the IEEE conference.
Yeah. Yeah, so let me put these on the list. Thank you for updating that. Yeah, I have the NeurIPS deadline on the DevoWorms sheet, but we'll add in. Actually, I can add 20. Well, I can add them down here too. 41 and 42. So those are oral. Those are. We have NeurIPS.
NeuroSim is, I guess, it's on 38 already.
Yeah. Yeah. And then this is March 21. All right. Yeah. And then this is well, I'll finish this later. The name of it.
Sure.
This is going to be the bias in AI paper, and this will be the positive feedback.
Yes.
Oops. All right, so yeah, I'll fill those out later in terms of the links and that. But those will be our targets as well. So again, we'll come back to this and check in next week. So that's the this list, and again, we can add to it. Now I wanted to switch to the ANN BNN paper. So this is the one that we've been wanting to submit to Alife. We had originally planned to do it as a extended abstract, but I decided that it needed to be longer, and so it needed to be a paper. And then I got into it, and I was like, this is going to be like pretty good paper actually, but you gotta we got to make it a little bit longer and more detailed. So it's definitely detailed now. This is based on the talk that we gave at Neuromatch, so it's the same framework, the same sort of outline, but it's got a lot of detail in it from the literature, and there's more coming out all the time on different things. But the argument is, how can artificial neural networks emulate the lifelike nature of biological neural networks? And there was an interesting tweet about that this week I'll get to in a little bit. So it talks about ANNs and BNN, how ANNs differ from BNNs a little bit. Some of the performance benefits of ANNs, or some of the performance gains that are very impressive, but they also don't behave like living systems. They don't behave like real brains. And so that introduces a problem that we still don't really know how to come to terms with. And so there's some fundamental shortcomings here. This should be down here. So we make a comparison between ANNs and BNNs. And there's this thing called sparse behavioral output, internal representation. I don't know if that's right, but maybe and in here. I'll make a note to change that. So I've prepared this in the document, and I also put it into the Alife template. And I don't know, Jesse, do you know what did I send you the Alife template? Did you get it?
I believe you did, but I don't know where it was sent to me, but I know it was sent to me at some point.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that in template, or is it like I'm familiar with using like Overloop and latex, so I don't know if I use it for it.
So this isn't the template. The template is actually in a Word doc, and I sent you the Word doc. I think in Slack, maybe as a DM, and it's two columned. It's something you can use in Google Docs, so you can just cut and paste. The text has to be like 9.5 point font, and so it's if your extended abstract's longer than 2 pages, that's okay. It'll fit in, but it has to be in that format. So this is not the format. I just wanted to go over it in this format to show what it looks like. So this is a comparison of ANNs and BNNs. And this kind of goes through the sparse behavioral outputs of ANNs, the internal representation, then the representational complexity more generally. And then there's this figure here that is like sort of a stock figure of like a BNN and an ANN. Oh, come on. There we go. And so just comparing the two, and I used a fair use image so we don't have to worry about copyright transfer. I'm just making this as like the preprint version. But this is, and so this goes on. Talk about the heterogeneity and dynamism of network architectures. So this idea that BNNs are both heterogeneous and have this dynamism that ANNs lack. And then citing the literature, of course, because people aren't going to just take your word for it. And then another way to understand this complexity is conceive of BNNs as complex brain networks. So there's some features of the complex brain network, such as the rich club structure, that lend itself not only to internal structure, but also energy efficiency. And then this is talking about flexible network configurations more generally. Actually, I cite the GLOM model in here, this paper. And then there's another figure from Ramon y Cajal, which is just a stock figure of like showing the complexity of BNNs and how they might differ from ANNs. And this is actually similar to the type of thing they're doing with hierarchical temporal modeling. And I mentioned that in the paper, but this is something that, people have thought in hierarchical temporal modeling. Instead of using like a standard ANN or a connectionist view, we can model the brain as a series of cortical layers that are connected not only laterally but also up and down, like vertically, through different layers of processing. And so people are emulating the BNNs in different ways, which we talk about in the paper. So I think that's something that the Alife group will be interested in. And then talking about like BNNs and different processes that go on. So the different processes that go on in BNNs that you don't necessarily see in ANNs. So one of those things are called opponent processes, which are things where you have, auto-regulation going on in the brain. Different processes shut down and start up in a sort of an opponent manner. And that's one thing I've pointed to here. That leads into a discussion of robust function, which is where, you can hit the brain with all sorts of distractions or perturbations and the brain will recover, whereas ANNs, they don't necessarily do that. And so this may be because it's the brain or the BNNs are more decentralized, but also have some hierarchical organization as well that allows them to overcome those things. And so why should we emulate BNNs? And so we have this discussion here about, why should we even bother emulating BNNs? There have been some papers coming out. There was a paper that was, I don't know if I cited it in here, but people have basically asked this question: why do we even care about BNNs if ANNs can do all the wonderful things that they do? And kind of talk about it a little bit in here. Some of the factors that we might think about. The advantages of BNNs that we might transfer to ANNs and so forth. And then I also have a couple of hooks in here where there are ways forward in the artificial life community. So I mentioned here, you can use more exotic types of computational models such as reservoir computers, the liquid state machines that, things that people in Alife have worked with. And, it might provide a path forward. If someone's reading this paper and they see one of these possibilities they might follow up on it. And then finally, there's a section. I know this is something that Jesse and I have exchanged notes on, where we talk about like BNNs as a phenotype for data. So this is an idea that, like, I'll show you the figure in a minute, where we kind of walk through BNNs, maybe having a phenotype or being embodied in something that would allow it to get, labels or access to context. And so this just kind of mentions a lot of this, maybe why that's justified and what that might look like. And then there's a summary of the paper. But here's the figure 3. So this is our organism. It's very similar to the vehicle that we discuss in the other paper, but it's I don't know what it is. It's a thixotropion, let's say. There are these things called thixotropic liquids. Ketchup is thixotropic, where they flow and they're sort of like solid liquid. They're in between those states of matter, and they pose challenges to an organism. So this organism would be going through like a thixotropic liquid, and it would be encountering all sorts of things in the liquid, and has a phenotype. So the phenotype has a consequence on the behavior, But the idea here is that you have these sensory inputs at different parts of the network, and they come into the network. And in this case, it's not really sensory inputs like you'd see in like the Baby Minds paper, but you would have data streams that come in, and they would be like oriented towards the left or the right, or anterior or posterior. You could stratify your data set accordingly, and then it would come into the network and get processed like any other problem. And then this is your neural network inside, and then there's an output out here, which is this is like more of a thought experiment. I might have to make that clear. But that's what it looks like. And then finally we finish up with talking about some of the alternate strategies of implementing ANNs. And so we start talking about unsupervised models and some other things that I found in the literature, such as goal-driven deep learning, or like these, what are they? There's this other type of approach where this is the approach. Unsupervised models optimized to imitate broad biological functions that perform similarly to functions such as visual processing and sensory learning. So these are 2 papers here from the Yeaman's lab at Stanford, where they look into these different versions of, training and designing ANNs. So in this case, they're doing a lot with unsupervised learning. It's sort of a broad developmental metaphor that they use for this, but basically they can get the model to learn in an unsupervised fashion. And then the other approach is called goal-driven deep learning. So people are looking at things that are goal-directed. They're looking at things that are unsupervised, and that's what this sort of embodied phenotype would give you, this sort of perspective. So, and then we have our references, which are actually quite a few references in here. There are a lot of things that have been in the literature that, I think we should cite. There are a lot of classic papers in here as well. It's hard to keep up with all the papers that people are writing on this topic. There's an interest, but I think this paper fills a void in the literature. Yeah, I think that's good. And it's right at 8 pages in the template. So we're right around 8 pages. And Jesse, if you want to add in any more changes, you can add them in by. I'm going to try to submit it tonight.
How much room do you think there is to do that?
I think probably about maybe 2 paragraphs would be probably the limit.
Okay. I don't think I wouldn't. Yeah, that's good. I'll keep that in mind. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Yeah, I mean, and then, I forgot to tell you that I had in the acknowledgments, I acknowledged NeuroMatch. So for the presentation opportunity. So
Yeah.
good. Krishna, are you there? I know
I think he's on the call a little bit.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
there.
All right. So what'd you think?
Well, it was, to be very honest, I don't have much to say.
Okay.
Actually, the paper was, pretty much amazing. It was, you can say a lot better than what I wrote. It was, it was drastic change between the thing I wrote and you have transformed it into a very well paper. Increased. I would have said you have improved it a lot. So I'll just give it one more read. I've read it earlier and I really liked it. So yeah, now it is much more I how do I put it? It's a lot more, you can say, professional. Yeah, if a person reads, you can certainly say that someone with very good understanding and good experience has written it. And the thing I was writing, it was quite, of a novice. So yeah, thanks for transforming it into in a very better way. And once I read your paper, I was kind of feeling that I should learn a lot from you how to write this academic stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's there's a lot there's a lot of literature to synthesize into it. I mean potentially, I want you to learn like how to do this. It's a good skill to have to be able to synthesize literature. So
I have to learn a lot from you.
yeah.
I'm still a novice.
That's fine. I mean that's something that you'll pick up eventually. But I think that was a very good. I think we started in a very good place, and we got it. We're getting it to something that's like a full paper that, there's a lot to consider in this type of a comparison because, people will ask you like, what do you mean by ANNs versus BNNs, and to have like a point by point, to go from like a basic outline and then like flesh it out in a presentation and then flesh it out in a full paper. It's a lot of kind of pushing the envelope in a lot of ways. So
and I think when I'm done with the other two papers, you improve them like you did this one.
Yeah.
So your job was really great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. So submitting it tonight, early tomorrow. The deadline's tomorrow, so we'll be getting that out, and then probably put out a preprint as well on archive, so that'll be out, and then we'll see what the reviewers say. And then Jesse has to fit his stuff into the template, and that'll be it'll be you have to change the font size and everything, and it has like all the details in there, so it's like mainly it's the font size and the spacing between headings and things like that. It's not, they have it all in the template, but it'll be a little tricky to get everything in there right.
When I first submitted my conference paper, it was 2 years back. I was in my freshman in my undergraduation. So I sent that paper in a comics font, and the reviewer was so short, and he was laughing and was saying that they don't how to submit a paper. And I was like, I really don't know. It was my first paper, so I made it so funky. I was adding some jokes in between. There was 2 memes, and the font was of comics, and it was and all of the review committee was laughing so hard. I was saying that next time be a little more professional.
Oh.
Yeah, it was my first time, so.
Yeah, well, it's I mean, you learn. I had to learn a lot when I started submitting stuff too. It's like, how to sort of present things to different audiences. It's like this is a different audience than say like NeurIPS or even NeuroMatch. They're going to be interested in like like life and evolution and the different topics. And they aren't, a lot of these people also are familiar with AI, but it's like a different take on it. And that's the key. Is trying to appeal to those people. So we may have done a good job or not. I don't know yet. We'll see.
According to me, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Okay, I wanted to get in with the other stuff now. We have some papers to go over. Let's see. So I wanted to get into some of this. I know last week we talked about the difference between Bayesian models and then also with cybernetics and with connectionism, and that was an interesting discussion. I wanted to kind of get into some of these other topics, though. Actually, I wanted to show this tweet first. This was the provocative tweet of the week here. Sam Gershman. Over a decade ago, Josh Tenenbaum gave a memorable talk at Cosine in which he argued that the language of neuroscience, and this is like the study of the brain, not like computational neuroscience, was essentially the language of 70s electrical engineering, and contrasted that with the modern language of CS. It's interesting that not much has changed since then. Why? And Maxim Roginski said, why? Because people insist on maintaining artificial boundaries between disciplines. Neuroscientists like Arbib, who is Michael Arbib, who's if you look him up, he's done a lot of stuff with like bio-inspired networks and things like that. He didn't actually cite him in this paper, but can speak both EE and CS languages effortlessly, and more importantly, sees the underlying unity clearly. And so then he talks about, he provides a link to this paper here. I think the lesson for, I didn't really, I felt kind of weird about this original tweet, because I thought it was definitely like, I think one of the reasons why sort of the language of neuroscience is stuck in the 70s electrical engineering is because maybe they're trying to find broad terms for like regulation. And, that's where you get them from. And I know this has like a lot to do with the cybernetics discussion and how, cybernetics hasn't really advanced since maybe the 70s, and especially in terms of like developing the vocabulary. So maybe they're doing that. They use a lot of terms like feedback and feedback loops and other things that are, maybe not up to date, maybe haven't diverged much from that original common ancestor. So, I mean, that's... Oh, you're going to say something?
Go ahead.
Oh, so that's kind of one insight I had on that. The other is that I remember when I was first studying neuroscience, and I was trying to figure out all the classes that they had, and they had something called systems neuroscience. And I somehow thought that was something that was going to give me insight into systems, like we think of systems as like, cybernetics type stuff, but it actually was about like different systems, like, subsystems of the nervous system, like the limbic system and all these other things. And they really approached it from a purely anatomical standpoint. It was like, these are the structures that are in the system, and it's doing something, generating behavior, but there was very little systems focus, like cybernetics type focus on it. So I just, I thought that was an interesting point, and I just reflected on that. I still don't know what to make of it, though. Jesse, did you have something to say?
I just found the tweet now. I didn't see that before. It's very interesting that, like, that's basically when I'm actually really. It's I don't really know the words to describe what is ironic or fitting or what, because yes, like that's when cybernetics dropped off the map. That's when it became sort of this like, it became anachronistic. And it's funny because you think about like it kind of became in the 80s, and then in the 90s it became like, I'm a cybernetic organism, like it was the Terminator thing. Like, cyborg, like it totally morphed into this like it kind of disappeared, and then it became this like science fiction boogeyman term that's associated with other like machine you know this sort of cyberpunk entities. And so like it's actually I've never thought about it. I've never heard anybody say it this way. And I know that Gershman is like, I don't think he's revolutionary in saying, but just to see it presented this way, and then to be asked why things that haven't changed. I have to go back and look at the talk now, because Tenenbaum doesn't speak about cybernetics directly in a lot of his contemporary talks. However, he seems quite. I would love to ask him, and I've tried, and I've never really been able to have like a one-on-one conversation with Tenenbaum. Obviously, I'd like to. I would love to just ask him, what do you think happened to? Might make a little more sense. I would love to ask him just like, what do you think? What's your take on cybernetics? Like, do you? I feel like it's the tweet. The tweet to me is almost this weird, and I don't know if this is the case or not, but it's almost like this weird sort of. It feels almost like a confession to me that cybernetics became a taboo term, and when like Minsky and the AI, the anti-connectionist term, when connectionism was sort of poo-pooed and there was this big shift towards the Minsky shift in AI. It's not the same thing. I don't think it is. Or like, I don't really see it as like the same thing as cybernetics no and Minsky's view of AI yes. Like I don't see those as the same thing. But there was like this like tide shift around this time, and so for Gershman, who I don't really know. I know he's very renowned psychology, brain science at Harvard, yes. But I don't know. I don't know his like background in terms of like I don't know his background in terms of basically. I guess cybernetics. Like I don't know where he comes from in that sense, because I assume he's not. I would assume he. I'm trying to read more of the thread now too, but it's not like I don't think he's ignorant of the developments per se, but more like to. I wonder how much he's pointing his question to the sense that there was stuff that was like basically what he said. Like, is it because of, hey, this is when those terms were still acceptable, and when we talk about them as most acceptable then, and then we'll keep borrowing that, and so we're dragging all the other like adjacent concepts from 70s and electrical engineering, and it's like, yeah, it again points to like this ties into one of his other tweets that we talked about a couple months ago, where it's like he had this tweet of like when are there's going to be like a historical approach to AI. It's pretty much the same. It's another riff on the same chord ultimately, in the sense of it'd be a great conversation. I would love to ask him the same question I was going to ask Tenenbaum, because it's like, is he asking the question? And I don't know him well enough, but is he asking the original question? You sort of tweeted as a sense of, hey, like pointing with the question saying, why hasn't this been legitimized in a modern sense, because it should be, and there's stuff we're drawing back to obviously from that point. Is that what he's trying to get at with the question? Like I see, I in the brief thing that I'm seeing on Twitter, like yes, he's on team biology, and he's it's he says arguably neuroscience is a victim of its own and deep learning success. You can make a lot of progress with EE computing primitives, but I think it also narrows our imagination. Biology is capable of wild things. I think that's sort of the conclusion to his points that he's making in the thread. And it's like, and you could potentially say that the era of the 70s is sort of his last gasp of cybernetics in a mainstream sense, because it was going up to like management cybernetics and business cybernetics and like cybernetics for therapy and like personal I don't know, like self-help kind of stuff. And those are all, and then even like into design, like one of the most, if you type cybernetics, at least like in the last couple of years when I started looking at it, if you type cybernetics, one of the first things that come up on Google search was someone who's in school design. Yeah. I forgot his name, but it's like, there's reasons for that. But there's no, and there's like a American, like something cybernetic society, but it's like, it doesn't, it kind of looks like it's from the 70s in some ways. And there's sort of this like, between the tweet that we were just looking at and the one that I mentioned about, oh, when are we going to have this, like historical artifacts of artificial intelligence, primitive theory or something. I forgot what he said a few months ago, but it's like, I would sort of like meet him at yes, biology and kind of neuro AI stuff is big, and also this sort of what happened, that was sort of the question that started me off on this path of like what happened to cybernetics, because I'm like, whoa, there's big stuff that happened, and I think Norbert, just to say this, like, I think there was a big split because you had some people like Shannon and I can't remember the other name right now. You had people who wanted to take cybernetics in a particular direction in terms of industrializing, in terms of military, in terms of where they wanted to go, and Norbert kind of was like, oh, okay. He sort of ethically resigned from a lot of his stuff, and he was very controversial because of it. And I think there was just this big fragmentation, but in that fragmentation process, along with the Minsky stuff about AI and symbolic and what linguistics and symbolic can give us and what connections can't give us, it's sort of like there's these different forces at play of cybernetics fragmentation, symbolic AI taking this big shift, which we're now heavily rebounding over the last decade. Now we've got deep learning and connections with them, big time neural networks that we can just throw all this stuff into, and tons of data. That was completely a different universe from the 70s and the 80s. From what I understand, as someone who didn't really live that period. But it's like now we're in a state where it's like, oh, we have all this data. We're really, I think another way to look at Gershwin's comment is like, someone at Cording has said a lot, Connor Cording said like, hey, and other discussions around neuromatch and some of the learning and so on stuff is like, hey, maybe having more data won't solve all of our problems in neuroscience. Maybe we have to continue to look at philosophy, we have to look at, the theories and challenges theories and incorporating different things into it. So it's like, I think there's a number of things that play here, and like these, I should make a collection of tweets from Gershman and others that are kind of pointing out the like discrepancies and disparities and obvious areas of overlap that that could or didn't happen and why, because it's sort of like, you see these people, and when I said it's sort of like a confession, I think what I meant at the start, or when I earlier, was like, you see these renowned people in different fields that are like, they're kind of up very high in their silo, and they're very renowned in these particular developed areas, and they're kind of looking across them and being like, hey, from my vantage point, here's what I see, but there's also this like big space that many things are pointing at or alluding to, but we don't have the right language. Like, this is a direct commentary on the modern language. Like, we're using these computer science terms, and that's probably because it's probably, it's not taboo. It's very in vogue. Like, oh, I want to express this in terms of neural networks, deep learning, and AI, and TensorFlow, and now we're gonna like, okay, let's talk about GP3, and like, this is what's cool to talk about. So like, even more incentive to talk about with the modern language of computer science, and making this comparison to the past stuff is interesting. So I'm going to step back from my soapbox. There you go.
Krishna, did you have anything to add?
Actually, yeah, I don't, know much about cybernetics, but I think that if cybernetics are, implied in a much more broader way than they are, kind of used today. We have, like artificial heart and proposed bionic eyes. I think that wouldn't it be, hampering evolution? So I'm not expert in this topic. It's just a normal thought. But I guess cybernetics could be limiting the scope of evolution.
Yeah, I think there's like a need to pick a language that's inclusive, but of course as science moves on, and goes into new areas, it's hard to keep up with that language. And even evolution, this is the next thing I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to try to do this next thing in about 10 minutes. And you'll see how it ties this together. It's actually about evolution. So, but the one thing last thing I wanted to point out about this as a transition is that you have, and I did a study on this a couple years ago, and I think Tenenbaum did the same thing, where they looked at different terms that have been used in NeurIPS and its predecessor NIPS over the last 25 years. And, you can look at like things that were happening at the conference like 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and you can actually see an evolution of the different terms. So like at the beginning, they were using various statistical terms. And then over time, like the top terms, if you like look at all the abstracts and you mine for keywords, the top terms change, and sometimes they don't. Some terms stay very similar over time. Like networks or neural networks is always in the mix. But then there are other terms that come up that are new terms of new technical approaches, or things that fall off, which are not maybe old-fashioned approaches. And it's an interesting study in how that language evolves. And so, maybe we should spend some time on looking at the evolution of language with respect to some of these fields, because I think it's very revealing as to A, where things are going, and B, maybe the need to have like a controlled vocabulary for that. So this is going to be I'm going to try to do this in 10 minutes. This is going to be a roundabout thing. But I'm going to start here with this other tweet, and this is by Will Gervais, who's he's interested in cultural evolution and psychological study of atheism, and also evolution in general. So he had this quiz for his followers. He said, if we replay the last 200,000 years of human evolution, how probable is it that they'll reinvent the concept of evolution by natural selection? So then the answers are, we're built like that, probably, but unsure, pretty contingent, we got lucky. And most people said we're built like that, I guess meaning that we were going to find it eventually, that we're very inquisitive, or that we were probably going to get there anyways. I have my own. I answered this, but I wasn't really happy with the choices that we had, and I have thoughts about that. I'm not going to share right now. Oh, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just laughing at it.
Oh, yeah. So I mean, that's the thing, and I think that's an interesting thought experiment, because people have asked, like, if we replay the tape of evolution, would we end up with humans? People have asked that question. He's flipping that on its head and saying, if we actually replayed human history, the history of intellectual history of humanity, I guess, would we come up with the theory of evolution by natural selection? In the comments to the tweet, some people pointed out that there were other people in antiquity who came up with ideas that were similar. And certainly Darwin had precursors that he built upon. So it wasn't like he was just taking a shot in the dark. On the other hand, can you say that any theory that we would have hit upon by now would have been as powerful? And that's maybe the question that we're asking. But I think the point there is that you're dealing with the evolution of theories and scientific frameworks. So that brings me to my other thing, which is this idea of paradigm shifts in theoretical development. So I've been assembling this collection of things on paradigm shifts, and more specifically looking at paradigm shifts as like this dynamical system. So paradigm shifts are, where you have one paradigm and then you shift to a new paradigm. So like, for example, in the study of evolution, at one time we had like the fixity of species, which was that God created all the species and that was that. And then we said, well, maybe not. Maybe it's like, you have where organisms evolve, but we didn't really understand how. So we thought, well, maybe they will their phenotypes into being, which is like the Lamarckian view. There were other views. And then Darwin came along and said it's natural selection. There's a selection on organisms that if they're in an environment and they're fit enough in their environment that they survive, and the ones that are less fit don't survive, and that's how you get this change. So this talks about simulating paradigm shifts using a lock-in model. And a lock-in model is something from like innovation studies or economics, and it's this idea that you have this historical contingency. So you start off at some point and you start to come up with these theories, and you can't just kind of come up with an idea whole cloth that's new. It has to be sort of contingent upon what came before it. And I think you can see that with Darwinian evolution, that Darwin built on some of the precursors that had come before him. He didn't just come up with this just out of nowhere. Okay, so this is the idea of lock-in, and they talk about simulating paradigm shifts using a lock-in model. So this paper talks about simulating paradigm shifts in a computer, and talks about Kuhn's idea of paradigm shifts, and then talks about like they talk about this in terms of adapting or adopting technology. So this is number of adopters of technology. This is the learning effect. They're plotting the evolution of problem-solving capacity. T is this S-shaped curve. So as the number of adopters increases, you get this period here where you get to a certain number of adopters, and they start to learn more about like this technology or this paradigm. So there's that paper, and they kind of model some of this, and they talk about a coevolutionary model as well. So they actually talk about the aviation industry and helicopter design and competing paradigms in economics that favor their counterparts in sociology or the political sciences. So you've had so you've had this in economics they like to use a lot of metaphors from physics as well, and so that has a reason. It's because people used to view physics as like the premier science, and so people would adopt metaphors from physics even if they're not really that suitable to the problem. They actually talk about something that I had been thinking about as well, which is this idea of using what they call the avalanche model or a phase transition model to understand how these paradigm shifts happen. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So that's the lock-in model. Then there's another paper that talks about paradigm shifts as information cascades. So they take a similar approach, but they think of it not in terms of like a tree of locked-in options or a contingency model, but of networks and ideas that spread across networks. So this is, again, modeling Popperian falsification. So they're doing this philosophy of science thing, and they're modeling it on a network. And this is an undirected network, an undirected graph. So now it's just that if an idea spreads to neighbors or neighbors of neighbors on a network, you can look at the diffusion. And then there's this Big Data, New Epistemologies and Paradigm Shifts by Rob Kitchen. This examines the availability of big data coupled with new data analytics, challenges established epistemologies across the sciences. So basically, it's saying that with big data, we're getting new ideas, new things coming into play. And this is what we see with deep learning, is that we have these technological innovations come, and then that changes the field. So you have, social science used to be done with surveys at a very small scale. Now you can do things at a very big scale with all sorts of data. And that's going to change the way that the field operates. It's going to change the language, because you don't have terms for certain things. You have, for big data, you have terms like volume, velocity, variety, and, even scope. So all those things, you wouldn't even have thought about them 50 years ago when you're analyzing your data, but now you have to think about them. You also have to think about the things that big data enables, so we can understand more about these social systems. We can understand more about, regulation, things like that. So it's, technological innovations like that are important too. So then I want to talk about this. What is this paper? This is the decade of theory as reflected in psychological science. So this is a newish paper that talks about sort of how, this idea that there's this dominant belief that science progresses by testing theories and moving towards theoretical consensus. So it's very similar to this idea of sort of, you have all these ideas, you put them in a pot, you pick the best ones, obviously, and then that's how you do science. And that's actually not really the case. They actually, in this case, looked at the psychology literature, and they found that the field suffers from a lack of cumulative theory, even though they have a lot of data. So they go through this, they analyze research papers published in psychological science for a decade. They found a lot of mentions of theories in the text, but they only refer to it maybe in passing. So, a lot of these ideas that come up in these papers aren't really tied to any sort of theory development. They're not really grounded in theory necessarily. So a lot of the work that's being done isn't really tied to theory. So the idea that it can be evolved through consensus is maybe not true. We want to have, we interpret these results to suggest that the majority of research published in this flagship journal is not driven by theory, nor can it be contributing to cumulative theory building. So, we're talking about like all this data that's being generated, all these papers, they're not really contributing to theory necessarily. There's no real consensus. Maybe it's like some ideas come to the top. Maybe there's this lock-in that happens where we sort of, not all the data, not all the stuff that we're generating fits into the modern theories, so we kind of just throw the theory part aside and, reflect on the data paper. But, you can see there's some trends in here that we can explore further. I finally wanted to finish this up by talking about the Sandpile model that I talked about a couple papers ago. And this is a Quantum magazine article on it. And I have another article here, which is the original paper. This is actually also in Scientific American. So this is self-organized criticality. So the idea behind a Sandpile model is you have, like, I know you've seen sand piles, like, you're on a beach and you have sand in your hand and you drop it on you can drop it on the ground and it'll form this pile. And if you want to grow the sand pile, you can take grains of sand and you can place them on the top, right? And then the pile keeps growing in size. But the thing is that because it's just being dropped on the top and it kind of rolls down the side a little bit, that pile becomes unstable. And so at certain intervals, and they're stochastic intervals, you can't like count to 10 and then find this effect. But there's a displacement of sand particles. So you keep dropping the particles on top of the sand pile, and then after a certain amount of time, which is non-deterministic, there's an avalanche of sand that displaces off at the top, and you keep building the top up. And I'm sure if you've built like a sandcastle on the beach, or you played with sand in your hands, you see this behavior where you scoop at it, and then behind the scoop you'll have things that like kind of there's an avalanche of things, but it's not even. It's very stochastic, and it happens at different time scales. And so this is something that they use to model change in systems. They call it the Sandpile model of phase transitions. And so the idea is that you get these changes in state that are both non-uniform, non-deterministic, and also something that we can plot on a graph that's somewhat predictable. So we know, for example, that sand piles are displaced without any sort of determinism, but we actually know that we can fit it to a distribution, a power law distribution that describes this behavior over time. If we look at enough avalanches across our sand pile building, we'll find that there's a power law that fits the data, and the data is that how many sand grains have been displaced in each avalanche. So if we count up across each avalanche, you see that most of the avalanches are very small, but then there's some that are very big. And so that's the statistical signature we're interested in. So they actually use this looking at a block model to predict earthquakes or to model earthquakes. They use these block models in this area a lot. And they're able to replicate this Sandpile model using earthquake data. So they're not predicting earthquakes, they're just measuring earthquakes, and they're simulating them in the block model. So this paper is quite old now. I think it was like 1991. So it's been around for a while, and people have come up with these ideas around this. They've applied it to a lot of different areas. This is, of course, Sandpile model. The mind grows in popularity. So this is actually transferring the Sandpile model concept to the study of the brain and the study of the mind and changes in the brain, like with respect to cognition and things like that. So you can see how so that's actually a dual lesson. One is that, when you look at the change, a theoretical change, which is a philosophy of science issue, you can use this Sandpile model to model those changes over time. But you can also use it as a metaphor in other fields, as a theory itself. I just wanted to bring that up because I thought it was relevant to a lot of the things that we were talking about in the group. I haven't been had a chance really to get into some of these topics because I've been kind of thinking about them sort of casually, but I wanted to present that. Okay, so this is from, I think, Krishna says cyberpunk is my favorite game, which is it's back to the cyberpunk discussion. And then Jesse says, I think I meant more of the genre of cyberpunk as a whole, but yes, the game fits. So yeah, you can chat more about that in Slack. But any thoughts about that?
No, I appreciate this. It's a good overview. I want to please send a collection of the papers because I was trying to get some of them for the tarot, but I didn't catch the title of some of them. So, but I want to read them, and I think they'll fit. Yeah, it was a good discussion from the Gershwin tweet all the way up through this. So I think something definitely fits with epistemological directories, but also sort of this. This is the kind of stuff that I think is super important for people, like very much frontier map as well, and that concept in the sense of I'm going to make a bold statement just because it's my experience, but in the vast majority and 90%, and probably like once I get into, if I get into a PhD program, I think it'll change, maybe. But even in discussion with a lot of grad students, the context that we're discussing here and how, you know, how the zeitgeist and the norms of the time and this sort of thing is just not really discussed enough to me, and it's sort of like, I feel like this is where you have to start from to seriously be looking at things. Because if you don't, it's sort of you're creating this progress looking at these things, and it's great. And I think I would even say this is probably a huge stretch, and it's probably, I will sort of criticize myself in advance of saying this, but I almost think, going back to Gershwin's tweet itself, it's like, why is there not much change? And it's because there isn't really a holistic sense of it. I'm not saying that's the only reason why, but I'm saying I think a reason is because there isn't really, also around that, one thing we didn't quite say, although it's kind of implied with a lot of things that have been brought up here, but I will refer to Margaret Bowden and her work, and she's done apparently compendiums of a bunch of stuff. I'm only familiar with her cognitive science one, like Mind's Machine. But in it, she basically says, there's a limit. There's sort of just this limit of being able to even try to make a coherent book about the history of a field. And she kind of put her cutoff time about, the turn of the century, and into this, I think her book came out in 2007, or like somewhere in the first 10 years of, before the deep learning explosion in 2010 and beyond, in 2012, whatever. And she was basically saying in her work, just for cognitive science alone, just this big monstrosity like Frankenstein together stuff, admittedly, like there's just a limit for having a coherent, unified, because back at the thing that I think the unsaid thing is why in the 70s we use this language from the 70s compared to modern terminology, because one, the computer science terminology today is ubiquitous. Everybody wants to talk about deep learning. Everybody wants to talk about neural networks. That's it. That's cool. Okay, so you have this accessible stuff, and you have this 70s throwbacks, but that's also the time where things simply just became so specialized and diversified. Like you were getting to a place where you couldn't really do it. Like there was that sort of a last, almost like Luca, last universal common ancestor. Like that, it's kind of getting to the Luca stage. Like that's when things started really breaking apart, and you had the amount. I was almost unintentionally referencing this before when I mentioned Gershwin and the silo stuff, and his viewpoint from being on one part of the silo. You have to be so specialized in this area, and there just isn't a unified, And that's almost like a super macro, like civilizational level cultural thing we're doing there too, and it comes up in the ethics framework discussion as well, and moral theory in general. But I'll step away from that, and it's I guess my main point from this round of it was, like the language, like you said about physics being kind of the cool science. Everybody wants to draw their knowledge from, and electrical engineering at the time, what was then, communicate, like fledgling communication science, by way of cybernetics as a somewhat hand waving mystical science, even though there's Norbert fleshed out the math behind it. He's a math man, but it's like there isn't really, what are the bounds and the commonalities from it, and I want to look more at papers like you said about the creating these unifications when available and how that affects things, but also like practically speaking, I don't really know what to do. I feel like the best thing we can do. I guess I'll return to my opening remark for this conversation. Was these conversations are so important, and I understand why they're so difficult, because it's sort of like you can't do it, and even the futility of my own efforts to map the frontier about stuff like this, and just this, you're kind of approaching the ocean with a teaspoon and saying, all right, I'm gonna move some water around, and but at the same time, it's like you kind of have to, even in the most basic generalizations, you have to kind of create some parameters about things, and some sense of perimeter, to outline stuff, and I think the more I think about, I'm staring at it on my other monitor, but the more I look at Gershwin's post, it's like, yeah, like the why, like the answer to that question, and Maxim was talking about artificial boundaries, and it's like, yes, I agree, and the boundaries and biology and neuro AI, but also I feel like that Luke is a nice way to talk about it, but like what is there? Like cybernetics is, inherently interdisciplinary, founded through things coming together, and it's sort of this. It's made to be. It was conceived as this transdisciplinary science or collection of principles, I guess, and it's just there aren't. At the same time, I know this is like extra bonus comment. At the same time, I would, because I don't know if it was in one of the other tweets that came up, but there was something similar, was like a theory of everything. Like I saw that on some of the slides here. Was that in a tweet or something?
I don't know, but yeah, it's a common thing, a theory of everything.
But this is almost a throwback to the Bayesian cybernetics, whatever. Like as much as cybernetics is the sort of principles for across different fields, I feel like Norbert Wiener would be like not interested. What I like about cybernetics personally also is like Norbert wasn't trying to make a theory of everything, and he explicitly made endeavors into uncertainty and how this is dealing with uncertainty, as opposed to saying, well, if we just have this one calculation, we'll solve all of our problems with like the universal physics theory or whatever. It's like, I appreciate that approach to it as well. And I think that's also why physics had to kind of tout, because it had this, big broad theories, classical mechanics. It's like, oh, we'll explain all this stuff, to this theory. And it seemed always much closer to the sense of, theory of everything. We're that close. Just string theory. Like I still have, I didn't really read the book, but like, Brian Greene's, the alligator universe, string theory stuff. And it's like, okay. So I don't mean to say cybernetics is this unifying theory of everything at all. I think that would be kind of like almost a perversion of it. But there's kind of just this. There's a vacuum, and it seems to kind of be almost a lost art altogether of having people. It's kind of cool. Like there's some coolness about it now, like interdisciplinary research and stuff. But that's why I like Envision, because you just don't get people just, hey, they'll still get in a talk. It's like the Macy's conference that actually led to cybernetics. You just brings people together, and stuff comes out of it. And so even the AI debates have been really good at that. Like Gary Marcus doing the AI debate too, with all these people coming together on different panels. Like I feel like that's maybe that will yield some of these things. And I know it's been a unified theory or way of talking about consciousness or even neuroscience or talking about the brain. Like, it's not things people aren't trying to do. It's just, it's what it is. So.
Yeah. Well,
Step away.
Thank you for that. That was a good conversation. I think there was a lot of stuff in there. So, I mean, yeah, we're out of time, I think, now, but next week maybe we should follow up on this. Krishna, did you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, maybe we can, have a chat in the, coming weeks.
Yeah.
And by the time, the prize paper would be, complete, and I'll be, getting started with the positive feedback paper.
Sounds
and I'll, try to read the papers you have sent. And, get a look on them.
Yeah. I put the link in the chat here if you want to download the papers. I have them in a folder. I think the folder is Paradigm Shift Simulations, and then there's another tweet in there. So, I mean, it's all in there.
And I'll be, very much interested in the big data and epistemology paper.
Oh, right, yeah. Oh, I can put that in there as well, yeah.
Yeah, I'll give it a read.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, and I'll put them in a Zotero folder too. I might try to make a specific like subfolder for each week or whatever topic, because this is really good for my users.
All right, well, thanks for attending. Well, see you guys next week, and we'll be on Slack discussing things, and we have our deadlines this week, so hopefully everything goes smoothly, and talk to everyone next week. Have a good week.
All right, take care, everybody.